The divorce papers are signed. The last message has been answered, and for the first time in months, the room is completely quiet. You expected the quiet to feel peaceful. Instead, it feels like three emotions arrived at once. You miss the person, you miss the future you planned, and somewhere underneath both, you feel relief. Then a fourth feeling appears: guilt for feeling relieved. If the marriage mattered, shouldn't the ending feel only sad? That question can keep someone trapped long after the legal part is finished. We tend to imagine major decisions like switches. Before the decision, confusion. After the decision, clarity. But a divorce is less like switching off a light and more like moving out of a house while several rooms are still full. One room holds love. Another holds anger. Another holds routines your body learned without asking permission. The decision can be clear while the emotions remain mixed. That is not hypocrisy. It is what happens when one event changes several parts of life at different speeds. So what, exactly, is the sadness grieving? Often, grief is not only about losing the relationship as it actually was, it is also about losing the relationship you kept hoping it might become. The repaired version, the calmer version. The future holiday, the older faces at the same table, the ordinary Tuesday 10 years from now. Those scenes were never guaranteed, but the mind had already furnished them. Divorce removes that imagined future in a single legal sentence. You can know the marriage needed to end and still mourn the life that will now never happen. But why does the former partner remain mentally present? Attachment is partly a prediction system. Over time, the brain learns who will be in the next room, whose footsteps belong in the hallway, and who receives the first message when something happens. After separation, the facts change faster than those predictions. Your hand reaches for the phone before memory catches up. A familiar song activates an old route. An empty side of the bed feels less like empty furniture, and more like a prediction error. The mind is not voting to reunite. It is updating a model built through thousands of repetitions. And updating takes time. Now consider relief. If the relationship involved chronic arguments, walking on eggshells, uncertainty, or repeated disappointment, the body may have spent years preparing for the next difficult moment. When that cycle stops, vigilance can drop before grief does. Sleep may improve. The shoulders may loosen. The home may become quieter. Relief answers a practical question. What pressure is no longer here? Grief answers a different question. What mattered and is now gone? Because they answer different questions, they do not cancel each other. But many people treat relief as moral evidence against themselves. Guilt turns the mind into a courtroom. Exhibit 1. You laughed today. Exhibit 2. You slept well. Exhibit 3. Part of you does not want the old life back. The verdict seems obvious. Perhaps you never truly cared, but that conclusion confuses suffering with loyalty. Pain is not a receipt proving love was real. Relief may simply mean something difficult has stopped. A person can care deeply, try sincerely, and still function better outside the marriage. The more useful question is not, am I sad enough? It is, what is each emotion trying to tell me? People also assume the person who initiated the divorce must recover easily. Research suggests the picture is more complicated. Having more choice can soften some consequences, while an unwanted separation can intensify shock and distress. But initiators may have grieved privately for months before anyone else knew. They may carry responsibility, doubt, or fear of harming the family. A joint decision can still contain unequal readiness. There is no single emotional timetable assigned by who filed first. The more important issue is how many losses and ongoing stressors the person must now reorganize. A marriage is also a small operating system. It organizes weekends, money, meals, friendships, family rituals, parenting, and the answer to the casual question, how are you two? When the marriage ends, the person does not lose only a partner. They may lose a role, a social group, a home, financial stability, or a familiar version of themselves. That is why an ordinary grocery trip can suddenly feel enormous. The list was once written for two. The cart becomes evidence that daily life has changed. So recovery involves more than reducing sadness. It requires rebuilding identity. At this point, the mind often starts reviewing the relationship. What if I had said something different? Which moment ruined everything? Was the good part real? Reflection can create a coherent story, and coherent stories can help the self reorganize. But reflection can also become rumination, the same questions circling without producing new information. In one experiment, expressive writing was not universally helpful. People already intensely searching for meaning sometimes did worse with more emotional writing. More analysis is not always more healing. A useful reflection produces a next step. Rumination only reopens the courtroom. Adjustment is not one smooth line. A person may feel steady for 2 weeks, then collapse when a tax form, school event, anniversary, or mutual friend's photograph activates another layer of the loss. That does not erase the previous 2 weeks. It reveals that recovery is context-sensitive. Longitudinal research finds many people improve over time, but not at identical speeds. Social support and attachment patterns matter. Continuing co-parenting conflict can remain stressful even while loneliness and distress improve. The curve changes because the environment changes, not because the person has failed a test. It can help to imagine recovery using 2 hands. One hand faces the loss. It remembers, cries, talks, and makes meaning. The other hand faces restoration. It pays bills, rearranges the bedroom, learns the new custody calendar, calls a friend, and cooks one meal. Healthy adjustment often moves between these hands. Staying only with loss can become immobilizing. Staying only with activity can become avoidance. The movement between them is not inconsistency. It is how a person gradually learns that the past is real and the present is still usable. Divorce can create a strange social problem. The person most familiar to you may no longer be the safest person to comfort you. Friends may choose sides, disappear, or offer advice before listening. Family members may want the story simplified into a hero and a villain. Yet support is one of the strongest resources associated with adjustment. Good support does not demand a clean narrative. It can hold 2 sentences at once. This relationship mattered, and leaving may still have been necessary. Sometimes healing begins when another person can tolerate the complexity you were trying to hide. Identity usually returns through small evidence, not one dramatic reinvention. You choose the music in the kitchen. You learn which evenings feel hardest. You revive a friendship that had gone quiet. You discover that loneliness and solitude are not the same thing. Each choice adds a line to a new self-description. Not the divorced person, but someone who values calm, keeps certain promises, asks for help, protects a boundary, or enjoys breakfast near the window. Self-concept becomes clearer when life repeatedly shows you who you are now, not when you force a perfect explanation of who you were then. Warm explanations should not minimize severe distress. If sleep, appetite, work, safety, parenting, or basic functioning remains seriously disrupted, professional support can be appropriate. The goal is not to diagnose every painful week. It is to notice when suffering has become difficult to carry alone. Therapy, support groups, legal guidance, financial help, or domestic violence resources address different parts of the problem. Asking for the right kind of support is not evidence that the divorce broke you. It is evidence that this transition has practical, relational, and emotional dimensions. Return to the quiet room. The empty chair is still there. The future you imagined has not returned, and the relief does not erase what mattered. But the quiet now means something slightly different. It is not a verdict on the marriage. It is space that has not yet learned its next shape. Grief can sit there. Relief can sit there too. Even guilt may visit, although it no longer gets to be the judge. Healing is not choosing one correct emotion. It is building a life large enough to hold the truth of what ended and the possibility of what comes next.